Why did everyone freeze when the alarm started, except her? The question would haunt them later, long after the smoke cleared and the base fell silent. But that morning, in the narrow corridor of the CIA known as Firebase Phoenix, she was just the woman with the scar. "Get out of the way, Scarface." His voice cut through the air like a slap. He was big, broad-shouldered, a SEAL Team 6 squad leader who moved through the world as if he owned every hallway. He shoved past her shoulder, sending a stack of files scattering across the concrete floor. Laughter followed like gunfire from his squad behind him. The fluorescent lights flickered above them, buzzing with the strain of desert heat pressing against the walls. The scar on her face, that long, jagged mark running from temple to jaw, caught the light in cruel fragments. "Jesus Christ," one of the younger operators muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "You here to translate or audition for a horror movie?" The laughter deepened, echoing down the corridor. Rachel Mitchell said nothing. She crouched, collecting the papers one by one, her movements quiet, deliberate. Her military-issue jacket hung too heavy for the heat, 45 degrees outside, maybe higher inside, yet she clutched it close. Sweat rolled down her neck, tracing the lines of old burned scars that disappeared beneath her collar. "Sorry," she murmured, the only word she gave them. "You should be sorry," shot back, "for showing up with a face like that." More laughter, the kind that carried arrogance and ignorance. If any of them had looked closely, they might have seen her hands tremble, but not from fear. It was something else, a rhythm of tension, like the memory of holding a rifle too long, waiting for a target that never came. None of them looked. They turned away, still laughing, still boys wearing war like a costume. And not one of them knew that the woman they mocked had once commanded the silence of mountains, that her name, whispered in certain circles, meant the difference between survival and annihilation. But they'd learn. In 20 minutes, everything would change. Inside the translation room, the hum of servers filled the air, a constant, sterile sound that could drown out almost anything except the ghosts in one's head. Rachel moved between piles of documents and monitors, hands steady now, eyes sharp. She didn't look like someone fragile. She looked like someone waiting. The map of Kandahar province lay unfolded across the table, lines of elevation and valleys drawn in pencil and sweat. Her fingertips hovered over a grid reference, tracing contours she'd memorized years ago. You could almost see it in her eyes, a place she'd stood before, somewhere far away and half burned into her mind. "Need anything, Mitchell?" The voice came softly from the doorway. Martinez, the team's medic, a calm presence in a place built on tension. He didn't laugh at her like the others did. Maybe it was because he'd seen pain before. "I'm fine," Rachel replied, eyes never leaving the map. He noticed the way she held her pen, not like a linguist, but like someone who'd spent years with the weight of a rifle. Thumb forward, index braced, the kind of detail only a soldier would notice. Before he could ask, his voice boomed from down the hall. "Mitchell, we need those intercepts translated before the briefing. Try not to bleed on the documents this time." The laughter followed again. When his team passed her workstation, one of them accidentally tipped a coffee cup. The liquid splashed across her desk, spreading over classified papers. She flinched just slightly, then reached for paper towels, methodical as ever. As she leaned forward, her sleeve shifted. Martinez caught a glimpse of something. Thin circles burned into her wrist. The marks weren't random. They were uniform, patterned, the kind of scarring that came from heated wire restraints. Noticed too, and true to his nature, lifted his phone. "Holy hell," he whispered, "check out the freak show." A click, a flash. The photo went to their group chat with a caption that would shame him for the rest of his life. "Taliban must had fun with this one." Rachel didn't react. She cleaned the mess, one careful motion at a time. But her eyes, when they flicked toward the reflection on the monitor, were cold, measuring. Martinez handed her a new roll of towels. You served, he said quietly. Her gaze lifted for a fraction of a second. Something flickered there. Then it was gone. Just a translator, she said. Always have been. But Martinez didn't believe it. 5 minutes to briefing. The intel analyst entered carrying a folder thick with fresh intercepts. Younger, sharp-eyed, and just as underestimated as Rachel. Two women in a fortress of men who thought empathy was weakness. These came in priority, said, setting them down. Command wants them translated ASAP. Rachel nodded. Her eyes began scanning the Pashto script, but she didn't reach for a dictionary or computer. Her hand moved faster than most people read. The pen scratched steadily, translating not word by word but thought by thought. Watched quietly impressed. You speak it fluently. Rachel didn't look up. You pick things up. Through the wall came's voice again. Briefing room in 5 and Mitchell, you're not invited. Translators don't need tactical knowledge. She didn't answer. Her gaze shifted to the patrol route map pinned to the far wall. For exactly 3 seconds she studied it, grid lines, convoy paths, fallback routes. Then she returned to work. She handed the finished translation too. Tell them to avoid grid 3792 tomorrow. Why? Increased chatter, movement in the area. You should tell them yourself. They won't listen to me. Rachel's face stayed unreadable. Just make sure someone knows. Lunch. The mess hall was loud, the air thick with dust and salt. Rachel sat alone in the corner, her tray untouched. The jacket still on, always on. At the main table, and his men laughed over stories of raids and firefights. Leaned close to, grinning. $20 says her whole body's. Gross man, someone snickered. Stood up, bottle in hand. Only one way to find out. He sauntered toward her, fake friendly. As he passed, the bottle tipped ice-cold water cascading down her back. She jerked up, the shock immediate. Oh, my bad, said, his voice dripping sarcasm. Here, you should take that off, dry it out. Rachel clutched her jacket. It's fine. Come on, he persisted, reaching for the collar. Don't be shy. I said it's fine. The edge in her voice, quiet but cutting, froze him mid-motion. Rose, his bulk towering over her. Problem, Mitchell. No, sir. Then take off the damn jacket. Dress code standards. There's no issue with security. I'll be the judge of that. The mess hall went silent. Every pair of eyes turned to her. She didn't move. And in that tense stillness, the collar of her shirt shifted, revealing the faint glint of dog tags, old, scratched, nearly unreadable. The unit's sniper frowned. Those are old-style tags, haven't seen those since. The sentence died as a siren wailed. Incoming fire. The first explosion hit before anyone could reach cover. The walls shook, lights flickered, and years of sand and dust fell from the ceiling like rain. Positions, now, shouted, his tone snapping from arrogance to instinct. Rachel didn't run. She just stood there, head tilted, lips moving silently. 3, 2, 1. Another impact, closer, perfectly timed. She wasn't flinching, she was counting. Martinez grabbed his gear. Get to the bunker, he yelled at her. But she didn't move toward safety. She moved toward the weapon rack. Mitchell, what the hell are you doing? No answer. In 15 seconds, she had an M24 sniper rifle broken down, checked and reassembled, fluid, efficient, trained. Williams tried to grab it from her. She, smooth as breath, and climbed the ladder to the observation tower before anyone could react. Scarface dropped the weapon, shouted. Then another shell hit 50 meters away, and the world dissolved into chaos. In the tower, Rachel dropped prone, scope aligned to the horizon. Through the lens, she scanned the hills and found them. 3 mortar positions, hidden well but not well enough. Grid 3792, she murmured. 3 tubes, Chinese Type 67s, 45-second rotation. She adjusted windage, exhaled slow, steady, and squeezed the trigger. The first shot cracked like thunder, 1,000-yard reach. One fighter dropped. Second shot, the loader fell across the weapon. Third shot, the sight mechanism exploded, turning the mortar into scrap. She shifted to the second nest, 3 more shots. By the time she sighted the third, the remaining crew had already abandoned their positions. The desert went quiet. Below's men froze, rifles half raised, staring up at the tower. Martinez whispered what everyone was thinking. Those were impossible shots. Watching from the command center, checked the range data she'd pulled days ago. The practice scores no one had taken seriously. "These aren't practice numbers," she said aloud. "These are record-breaking." Rachel climbed down, the rifle slung casually over her shoulder. As she reached the ground, the sleeve of her jacket tore on a bolt, revealing more than just burns, a small tattoo, faded by time and scar tissue. Letters and numbers. Military formatting. Unreadable to most. But to some, it would mean Viper 19. Before anyone could ask, a shout came from the gate. Ground assault incoming. The attack had only just begun. And Rachel Mitchell, the woman they'd mocked as a monster, was about to remind them what monsters truly looked like. Why didn't she run when everyone else did? That was the first thing noticed, even through the chaos, the screams, the gunfire tearing through the air. Everyone was diving for cover, grabbing rifles, shouting coordinates, falling back. Everyone except Rachel Mitchell. She stood in the courtyard, rifle still slung over her shoulder, calm in the middle of the storm. "Mitchell, get to cover," barked, voice hoarse over the noise. But she didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on something beyond the perimeter wall, something only she seemed to see. A shape moved across the hills, shadows in motion. Trucks, at least 4 of them, kicking up clouds of dust as they advanced. Mounted .50 caliber guns glinting in the sunlight. The ground trembled again. Mortar fire, closer this time. "Positions," yelled. "We've got vehicles approaching fast." His team scrambled into defensive spots, years of training taking over, and took the west wall, climbed the tower. Martinez dragged the wounded from the first impacts toward makeshift cover. Rachel stayed in the open, unflinching, scanning the horizon like she was waiting for something to align. Grabbed her shoulder roughly. "You want to die out here, Mitchell." She turned her head slowly, and for the first time he saw it. Not fear, not confusion, calculation. "Grid 3792, she said softly. "You should listen." He froze. That was the same grid reference she'd warned them about earlier. Then another explosion hit, this one close enough to blow out windows and send debris flying. The blast wave knocked him back, and when he looked up, she was already gone. Up the tower again. She moved with impossible efficiency, loading the M24 she just fired minutes before. The rifle felt like an old friend in her hands. The radio crackled to life, his voice breaking through static. Multiple vehicles confirmed, hostiles inbound from the east. Firebase perimeter breached in 2 minutes. "Copy," replied. "Mitchell in the tower. Try to keep her from getting herself killed." But he didn't sound confident anymore. There was something about her calm, something that unsettled even a man like him, who'd been through 6 tours and countless firefights. Through the scope, Rachel watched the enemy convoy approach. Her breathing slowed. 3 trucks, 2 technicals, 1 troop carrier. They were moving in tight formation, too tight. Amateur mistake. She took the first shot. The bullet punched through the windshield of the lead vehicle, hitting the driver clean between the eyes. The truck veered sideways, crashing into the one behind it. She adjusted half a degree left and fired again. Another target dropped, then another. The convoy erupted into confusion, men shouting, jumping from the back of trucks, scrambling for cover that didn't exist. Down below, team returned fire, their confidence rising again. They didn't know who was covering them from above, not really, but they knew someone was. For the first time, the arrogant laughter that had filled the base just hours ago was gone. Now there was only the sound of combat and her rifle, a steady heartbeat above the chaos. Inside the command center, typed furiously. She had Rachel's personnel file open, but it didn't make sense. Translator, contracted 6 months ago. No military history, no service record. Yet the clearance level, top secret SITK. Why would a translator need clearance that high? She muttered. Martinez, crouched beside her treating a wounded operator, overheard. You think she's not who she says she is? I think, said, pulling up the digital signature on Rachel's onboarding papers. Somebody wanted her here and wanted no one asking why. Another explosion rocked the building, grabbed her laptop and sprinted to the courtyard. Through the dust and smoke, she saw Rachel still in the tower, still firing, and realized she wasn't just defending the base. She was commanding the fight. The gunfire eased for a moment. The surviving attackers were regrouping near a ridge, using wrecked vehicles as cover. Rachel's breathing slowed again. She whispered to herself, as if reciting an old ritual. Wind 2 clicks east, elevation 1105. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Another shot, one more body hit the dust. She didn't miss, not once. And that's when the CIA liaison, Deputy Director Rogers, stepped out of the command center. His immaculate uniform was already dusted with sand, his face pale with anger or fear. What the hell is she doing? He shouted. Get that woman off the tower. Turned toward him, breathless. She's taking out the mortar crews, sir. Saved our asses twice already. She's not cleared for combat. She's a translator. No, sir, Martinez muttered under his breath. She's something else. Rogers glared at them both, jaw tight. If she gets herself killed, it's on your head. Opened his mouth to reply, but stopped. Because in that instant, something strange happened. Rachel looked down from the tower, locking eyes with Rogers. And he froze. Recognition flickered, unmistakable, sharp, and terrified. He knew her. The battle raged on. The enemy fighters pressed closer, using RPGs now, forcing team to retreat toward the main buildings. Rachel climbed down from the tower, her rifle slung across her back, moving through the chaos like a shadow. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't panicked, she was thinking. Every movement, every turn, every burst of fire was deliberate, surgical. When's position was overrun, she appeared beside him, weapon raised, dropping 2 attackers with 3 precise shots. He stared at her in disbelief. Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? She didn't answer, she just reloaded. And moved on. By the time's team regrouped inside the command building, she was already there, covering the entrance, firing with the precision of someone who'd lived on battlefields longer than she'd slept in beds. Watched through the security feed, all replacing the disdain in his eyes. That's not a translator, he whispered. Behind him, Rogers stood stiff, expression unreadable. Pull everyone back, he ordered. Fall back to the east corridor. We'll regroup and evacuate. Rachel's voice came through the radio, calm and certain. Negative, that route's compromised. Rogers snapped. Who authorized you on this frequency? Hesitated. Mitchell, how do you know that? Because it's the same pattern, she said, her tone dropping to something cold. Kandahar, August 2019. Helmand, October. Someone's using Unit 19 tactics against us. The entire room went silent. Unit 19. A name spoken only in rumor, a ghost story whispered in black ops circles. A team that didn't exist on paper but whose missions changed wars. Every operator elite. Every assignment impossible. Every member believed dead. Martinez stared at her through the doorway. You were Unit 19. She didn't respond. Outside, the fighting intensified. Minutes blurred into hours. The attack was relentless, coordinated, far too precise for local insurgents. The enemy knew their positions, their weak points, even their fallback routes. Someone inside had given them everything. When an RPG struck the command center, the blast tore through the ceiling, throwing everyone to the ground. The sprinklers burst, spraying water across the room, and that's when it happened. Rachel's jacket, torn, soaked, clinging, finally gave way. The fabric stuck to her skin, revealing what she'd hidden all along. Her back was a battlefield of its own. Scars layered upon scars, burns crossing whip marks, a horrific map of pain and survival. And in the center of it all, burned deep into flesh with surgical precision, were the letters and numbers that silenced the room. V-197. His voice cracked first. Viper, Unit 19, Operator 7. The room went still. Roger's face went white. Martinez, still kneeling beside the wounded, whispered, "You're the ghost sniper. You're supposed to be dead." Rachel turned, meeting their eyes. Her expression didn't change. "Not dead," she said quietly, "just forgotten." Rogers reached for his sidearm, too slow. The doors to the command center burst open, and a squad of Rangers flooded in, weapons raised. At their head, a man with 3 silver stars on his collar, General Harrison, commander of Joint Command. He took one look at the scene, the wounded, the chaos, the scars on Rachel's back, and stopped cold. "Viper," he breathed. Rachel didn't move. Water dripped from her jacket, pooling beneath her boots. "They told me you were dead," Harrison said, voice breaking with disbelief. "You saved my life in Kandahar, Operation Serpent's Fang." Every operator in the room turned to stare. Even the man who'd mocked her that morning felt his throat tighten. He knew that name. Every soldier did. A mission so impossible it was classified out of existence. A lone sniper who held off an entire Taliban battalion for 72 hours so a trapped company could escape. No one had ever known who that sniper was. Until now. Rachel's voice came, steady and low. "He sold us out." Her finger pointed at Rogers. "He gave the Taliban our positions, our routes, our extraction points. 12 operators died because of him." Rogers drew his gun in desperation, but Rachel moved first. A twist, a strike, the weapon clattered to the floor. She pressed his own pistol against his chest. Her voice didn't shake. "8 months," she said. 8 months you had me." No one breathed. 8 months of questions. Where? Unit 19. What are their protocols? Who are their operators? Her eyes were empty now, hollowed out by something far deeper than anger. "Every scar on my back is a question I didn't answer." The memory hit like a storm, the dark room, the smell of blood and rust, the sound of Roger's voice echoing in her mind. "Tell me where your team is positioned and this can end." She'd never spoken, not once. Now standing over him, the same voice came out of her throat, steady as the barrel of a rifle. "I remembered every word you said, Rogers, every time you laughed, every day you promised I break." She chambered around. "I didn't break." General Harrison raised a hand, voice steady. "Stand down, Viper." Her eyes stayed on Rogers. 12 names, General, 12 ghosts. "We'll get him," Harrison said, "the right way." Silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Then Rachel lowered the gun. Her voice softened, barely a whisper. "I survived because I knew this moment would come." The Rangers restrained Rogers. Harrison turned toward her, emotion flickering behind the steel of command. "You're a legend, Viper, but legends aren't supposed to bleed like that." She looked down at the torn jacket, at the scars the water had exposed, and said, "Legends don't bleed. People do." And then, for the first time since the attack began, her hands started shaking. Outside, the last of the gunfire faded. The attackers were dead or fleeing. Inside, the truth had finally surfaced, but it was only the beginning. The traitor had been caught, the ghost had returned, and the men who'd mocked her scars now saw them for what they really were. Not wounds, not shame. Proof. Proof that sometimes the most broken-looking soldier in the room is the one who already survived hell and came back carrying fire. Why did the general salute her first? That's what no one could explain afterward. A three-star commander, standing amid smoke and chaos, raising his hand to a woman in a torn jacket. But when Harrison's palm met his brow, everyone felt it, the weight of history, the recognition of something bigger than rank. "They told me you were dead," he'd said. And for a long time, she had been, at least on paper. Now the base was quiet, save for the crackle of burning vehicles outside. The sand smelled of oil and blood. Inside the command center, the Rangers had Rogers in restraints. His immaculate uniform was gone, his face streaked with dust and sweat. Rachel stood a few feet away, her back still exposed, the room lit by the harsh glare of emergency lights. No one could look at her scars for long. The patterns were too deliberate, too cruel. Martinez whispered it first. "Those burns, that's torture methodology, precise, systematic." The general's jaw tightened. "Who did this to you?" Rachel didn't answer. She just looked at Rogers. "He did." Rogers laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "She's lying. She's unstable, PTSD delusions. She's been through trauma." "Enough," Harrison snapped. Rachel reached into her ruined jacket and pulled something from the inner pocket, a small, waterproof case, sand-scratched and old. She tossed it onto the table. 8 months, she said quietly. "You recorded everything, Rogers, every interrogation, every question, every scream. That's the memory card you kept, your insurance. Only your contractors made backups too. Took me 2 years to find them, another year to track you down." Harrison nodded to an Intel tech who inserted the card into a secure laptop. A few seconds later, the room filled with sound, muffled voices, then a scream, raw and unmistakable. Rogers' own voice followed. "Tell me where Unit 19 is. You can end this." Everyone froze. The sound cut. The silence afterward was unbearable. Rachel's voice didn't tremble. 12 of us went into Pakistan. Only one came out. He sold us out, gave the Taliban our routes, our extraction points. Then he took credit for cleaning up the mess he made." Rogers' eyes darted to Harrison. "You can't prove any of." "Shut up," the general said. His tone could have stopped a war. Then softer to Rachel, "You said 12 went in. Who were they?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. "Unit 19, Covert Counterinsurgency Task Force, disavowed after the ambush." Her voice cracked slightly, almost imperceptibly. 12 operators died because of him. They deserve justice." Harrison turned to his aide. "Get Jag on the line, lock down the base. No one leaves." Hours passed. The night pressed in. The smell of burnt sand mixed with antiseptic and adrenaline. Rachel sat alone at the edge of the command room, wearing a black t-shirt someone had found for her. The jacket lay folded on a chair, shredded, blood-stained, beyond repair. The scars on her arms were visible now, illuminated by the blue light of a monitor. His team lingered near the door. They didn't speak loudly anymore. Their usual swagger was gone. The loudest of them all finally whispered. I poured water on her, laughed at her scars. Martinez placed a hand on his shoulder. You did what everyone did. You saw what she wanted you to see. The words hung in the air. Rachel didn't look up, but she heard them. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, not forgiving, just factual. People see scars and make assumptions. That's human nature. I counted on it. Approached cautiously, stopping a few feet away. We didn't know. You weren't supposed to. He nodded once, humbled. Then I owe you my life. For the first time, something faint passed through her expression. Not a smile exactly, but the ghost of one. You owe it to the ones who didn't make it. By morning, there was swarming with investigators, JAG officers, intelligence auditors, CID agents. The base had turned from fortress to crime scene overnight. Rogers sat in a corner room under guard, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. His arrogance was gone. Every few minutes he'd glance at the window as if expecting someone to come for him. In the briefing room, Harrison reviewed files spread across the table, had pulled every classified document she could decrypt overnight. The evidence was overwhelming. Payments from offshore accounts, explained, scrolling through transaction logs. Encrypted messages to enemy intermediaries. He sold not just Unit 19, but at least 3 other special operations teams over the past 5 years. How many dead? Harrison asked. 47 confirmed, maybe more. Rachel's voice cut through the room. He wasn't acting alone. Everyone turned to her. She was leaning against the wall, hands folded, gaze fixed on the data scrolling past. His orders came from higher, she continued. He was too careful to work alone. Someone else coordinated. Nodded. There are references to a code named Scorpion. Multiple transactions link back to it. Roger's name appeared on the screen again, attached to encrypted messages signed only with that alias. Harrison exhaled. We'll get the truth from him. Rachel's eyes darkened. He won't talk unless I make him. You're a witness now, the general replied. Let the process work. Her tone turned to iron. You didn't hear the screams on that recording, sir. The process didn't save us then. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the old commander and the woman who refused to die. Finally, Harrison nodded. 5 minutes, supervised, no contact. The interrogation room smelled of sweat and fear. 2 investigators stood behind the glass. Rachel entered without a sound. Rogers didn't look up at first. When he finally did, color drained from his face. Hello, Commander, she said softly. Long time. He swallowed hard. You shouldn't be here. She circled the table slowly, every step deliberate. You used to say that too. You shouldn't be here, Viper. Every day for 8 months. He flinched at the name. She leaned forward, scar catching the light. You remember day 137. You brought in the man with the electrical equipment. You said the face was already ruined, might as well make the rest match. Stop. Day 212, she continued. When you tried drowning instead, you were creative, efficient, proud. His voice cracked. What do you want? I wanted you to feel what I felt, but then I realized that wouldn't be justice. Justice is watching you realize you lost, completely. He broke, tears came, ugly and uncontrolled. It wasn't me. Scorpion made me do it, threatened to expose me. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Rachel's eyes flicked toward the glass. You're recording this. Harrison's voice came through the intercom. We are, keep going. Name's Rogers, she said. He hesitated, then defeated. Deputy Director Sarah, NSA, she's Scorpion. She runs assets across CIA, DIA, JSOC. Everything flows through her. The investigators froze. Harrison muttered something under his breath that no one caught. Rachel stared at Rogers, her tone flat. She was read into Unit 19 6 months before the ambush. Timeline fits. He nodded miserably. I was the cutout, she gave the orders. Harrison stepped into the room, face carved from stone. Where is she? In Washington, but you'll know something's wrong. I was supposed to check in by 1800. The general looked at his watch. 2 hours. He turned to Rachel. We move now. The preparations were quick, silent and precise. SEALs, Harrison's Rangers, and a handful of federal agents formed a joint task force. Rachel stood at the center of the operations table, scanning satellite feeds. She moved like someone coming back to life, nerves raw, instincts sharpening. County, she said, pointing to a heat map. Safe house under a shell company. She'll have 6 to 8 personnel, maybe more. Harrison studied her. How do you know all this? Because I've been tracking them for 3 years, she said simply. Every transaction, every meeting, every dead drop. Rogers was just the last piece. Martinez looked up from packing his medical kit. You've been hunting them this whole time. Rachel nodded. I didn't crawl out of that compound to hide. I crawled out to finish what they started. Harrison's gaze softened, respect and sorrow blending in his expression. You shouldn't have had to do this alone. I wasn't alone, she said. The ghosts were with me. The room fell quiet. Then briskly, we move in 2 hours. In the hangar, the team geared up under the dim light of sodium lamps. The whine of engines filled the space. Approached her, helmet tucked under his arm. You sure you're ready for this? Rachel adjusted her rifle. I've been ready for 3 years. He hesitated. You know, when you first showed up here, I thought you were. She cut him off gently. I know what you thought. He nodded. Then I'll say this once, we've got your back now. For the first time, she let a breath escape that almost sounded like relief. That's all I ever wanted for my team. The engines roared to life. The ramp closed. As the plane lifted into the night, Harrison's voice came over the intercom. We've got authorization for immediate action. Objective, capture of Sarah, alias Scorpion. Godspeed. Rachel sat by the window, the desert fatting beneath them. Her reflection stared back, hollow, determined. Slid into the seat beside her, tablet in hand. Can I ask you something? Rachel didn't look away from the glass. Go ahead. What kept you alive in there for 8 months? Rachel's voice came quiet but steady. Rage. They took everything from me, my team, my name, my future. But they couldn't take that. I held on to it, fed it. Every day I told myself if I survive, I'll use it to burn them down. Swallowed, eyes shining, and now? Rachel turned to her, expression unreadable. Now I fight for something else, to make sure no one else ends up where I did. The younger woman nodded slowly. Then they picked the right ghost. Outside, the clouds broke. The moonlight washed over her face, softening the edges of old pain, revealing something almost human beneath the steel. Somewhere ahead, in a quiet house in Virginia, another battle waited, not with rifles but with truth. And the woman they'd mocked, as broken, was flying straight toward it. Why was it so quiet when they arrived? They sat at the edge of a sleepy Virginia suburb, an unmarked colonial with darkened windows, surrounded by silence so deep it felt staged. No dogs barking, no crickets, no movement. Just the soft hum of the wind through the trees. Rachel stepped out first. Her boots touched asphalt, then dirt. The air smelled different here, wet leaves, cold rain, and the faint static charge that always came before violence. Through her earpiece, Harrison's voice came steady. Teams Alpha and Bravo in position. Delta on standby. No lights, no sound. Execute on my mark. She scanned the house through night vision. Thermals. His voice crackled softly. 6, maybe 8 heat signatures inside, stationary. Haven't moved in 30 minutes. Too still, Rachel murmured. This feels wrong. Copy, whispered from behind her. Still going in. Rachel's reply was immediate. We go in. The command felt instinctive, natural, the way it used to be, before the world labeled her a ghost. Harrison gave the go. Execute. The breach was surgical. 3 teams, 3 entry points. Doors blown, tossed, boots thudding on hardwood floors. Rachel entered through the east side, rifle raised, every nerve alive. The hallway was narrow, lined with family photos, fake, staged. She cleared the kitchen, the living room, each room empty but immaculate. His voice came through the comms. Basement clear, top floor clear, we've got. He stopped. Rachel moved toward his voice, her breath controlled. When she reached the dining area, she froze. Bodies, 6 of them. Men in tactical gear, all shot execution style. Each one clean, single round to the forehead. The air smelled of copper and gun oil. And at the kitchen table sat a woman, hands folded, expression calm like she'd been waiting for them. "Good evening," she said evenly. Her voice was smooth, controlled, eerily unafraid. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Rachel leveled her rifle. "Sarah." The woman smiled faintly. "You know my name, that saves us time." Harrison entered behind her, weapon drawn. "Sarah, you're under arrest for treason, espionage, and the murder of federal agents." Turned her head slightly, eyes flicking from him to Rachel. "You're new," she said, studying her face with unnerving precision. "Special operations by the stance. Ranger? No, something quieter. Delta, perhaps." Rachel said nothing. His gaze dropped to her hands, calloused, then to the faint burn pattern visible under her sleeve. Her eyes widened. Recognition bloomed. "That scar," she whispered, "I've seen it before." The air changed. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Rogers had shown her the photos once, realized the proof of a dead operative. "Impossible," she murmured. "You died in Pakistan, we confirmed it, the body was burned." "The body wasn't mine," Rachel said softly, lowering her rifle just enough to let the words hit harder. "You should looked closer." For the first time's composure cracked. "Viper." Surprise. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Looked between them, then leaned back in her chair. "So the ghost returns. I should known Rogers wasn't capable of killing you himself. He always lacked endurance." His team fanned out, securing the room. Harrison's Rangers took the hall. And still sat there, unshaken, elegant, smiling faintly like a professor watching students attempt a test she'd already written. "You've caught two pieces of a very large puzzle," she said. "Do you really think it ends with me?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "Save it for your lawyers." "Lawyers?" she laughed quietly. "General, I've read every operational directive you've ever signed. I know which covert units you've disavowed, which missions you've buried. There will be no lawyers. There never are." Rachel stepped closer, her boots creaking against the floor. "You talk too much." Tilted her head, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. "And you, Operator 7, act too quickly. That was always your flaw." "I don't make the same mistakes twice." "No?" asked softly. "Then tell me when you kill me, because we both know that's what you came here to do. Will it bring back your unit? Will it erase the screams? Will it make those scars vanish?" Rachel's silence was her answer. Smiled almost kindly. "You confuse revenge with justice. You think ending me makes the world cleaner. It doesn't. It just proves you're still one of us." "One of you." Leaned forward, her eyes catching the faint light. "You were trained for the same darkness I was. We both know how far the system will go when it wants results. You survived what others couldn't. You didn't escape it, Rachel. You became it." Rachel's hand twitched at the mention of her name. "Don't say my name." "I'll say it again. Rachel Mitchell, Viper, Unit 19, Operator 7, said each title slowly, savoring it like a confession. "The agency mourned you, buried an empty casket. Do you know how much paperwork it took to erase you? You're a ghost they can't acknowledge." "Maybe that's exactly what I need to be," Rachel said quietly. Studied her for a long moment, then laughed soft, almost admiring. "Oh, you really are magnificent." The sound of boots echoed from the hall. Entered, tablet in hand. "Sir, we've got full confirmation. Rogers' files match transactions. Offshore accounts, crypto wallets, encrypted messaging protocols. We've got her dead to rights." "Do you?" murmured. "Or do you have what I wanted you to find?" Hesitated. "Because if I were in your position," continued, "I'd stage a house, plant 6 corpses, wipe servers clean, and leave just enough trail for the hounds to follow." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "You're saying this is a diversion?" "I'm saying," replied, smiling faintly, That the web doesn't die with one spider. Cut one strand and three more form behind you. The tension in the room deepened. Rain drummed against the roof. Put her in custody, Harrison ordered. Secure everything, we'll sort the rest later. Men moved in, zip-tying hands. She didn't resist. As they led her out, she turned back to Rachel. One question before we end this little reunion. Rachel didn't reply. What did it cost you to survive 8 months with Rogers? The words hit harder than any bullet. Rachel's jaw tightened. Everything. Smiled as if satisfied, then were the same. The flight back to Washington was long and silent. Rachel sat near the rear of the transport, hands folded, staring into nothing. Sat beside her, glancing at the file on her screen. We've got her confession, financials, communication trails, it's airtight. Rachel didn't answer. Her mind was somewhere else. Words lingered. Cut one head off, three more appear. The sky outside glowed faintly pink as dawn began to rise. The sound of the engines hummed through her bones. Harrison approached from the front of the cabin. We've got her locked up in a secure facility at Langley. She's not talking yet, but she will. Rachel turned her head slightly. She will when she wants to. You don't think she's afraid? She's afraid, Rachel said quietly, just not of prison. The general frowned. Of what then? Rachel looked out the window, voice low. Of whoever she answers to. Hours later, sat in a white interrogation room, wrists cuffed, face expressionless. A camera blinked in the corner. Harrison entered with Rachel at his side. Smiled faintly. 2 ghosts in one room, how poetic. Your network's finished, Harrison said. Rogers turned, you're done. Done, she echoed. General, I don't think you understand how big this was. You haven't cut off the head. You've just bruised the tail. You can stop playing games. The evidence is overwhelming. Oh, I don't doubt that, but ask yourself who benefits when I fall. Rachel crossed her arms. You mean your boss? Lips curled. Boss, no, I prefer client. What client? Harrison demanded. Leaned forward, lowering her voice. You think the intelligence world has sides, General? It doesn't. There's only commerce. I sold what others wanted to buy, locations, operations, men and women who'd already been written off as expendable. You call it betrayal. I call it capitalism. Rachel stepped forward slowly, every word measured. You murdered my family. I didn't touch your family, replied. I just handed them to people who would. For a second, the room went deadly still. Then Rachel spoke, voice barely a whisper. That's worse. The rest of the interrogation blurred into noise, threats, evidence, lawyers, endless legal phrases that meant nothing to Rachel anymore. She watched face instead, the calmness, the composure, the cold certainty of someone who believed she'd already won. When the session ended, Harrison ordered her transferred to a secure holding facility under military guard. Rachel lingered in the hallway afterward, the adrenaline fatting, the weight of the past 3 years settling back into her bones. Found her there, leaning against the wall, silent. You good? He asked softly. No. He nodded, didn't think so. She looked at him then, eyes heavy with something he couldn't quite name. This doesn't end here, right. Someone else is pulling the strings. So what do we do? Rachel adjusted the strap of her rifle. What we always do, we hunt. That night in her temporary quarters at Langley, Rachel sat alone. The scars on her back burned with phantom pain, the kind that came when memories refused to fade. She opened a folder on her desk, 12 photos arranged neatly in a grid. Her team, Unit 19. 12 faces, 12 names. Still here, she whispered to them, still fighting. Her phone buzzed, a single encrypted message. No sender, no traceable origin. 5 words. Scorpion was not the head. She stared at the screen, the chills settling into her chest. Outside, the wind howled against the glass. It never ends, she thought. Then she turned off the phone, locked it in the drawer, and reached for her rifle. Because her hunt, had only just begun. Why did the lights flicker that night? Rachel noticed it first, a brief pulse almost imperceptible as she sat alone in her Langley quarters, the hum of the ventilation masking the silence. Then again, the lights dimmed once more. It wasn't a power surge, it was a signal. Her instincts kicked in. She closed the file in front of her, the dossier marked Operation Helios, and reached for her sidearm. Outside, the corridor was empty, sterile, bathed in white fluorescence, too quiet for an active facility. Then faintly from down the hall came the sound of boots, measured, deliberate, wrong. Security shift, over, she murmured to herself. No patrols till 0200. The boots kept coming. She stepped into the shadows by the doorway, breathing slow. The reflection off a framed plaque gave her a glimpse, two figures in black tactical suits, faces obscured by visors, weapons drawn. No insignia, no ID. They weren't agency. She waited until they passed her door, then struck. A single fluid motion, arm around the first man's neck. Silence, one sharp twist. The second turned too late. Her knife flashed, catching the light only once. He dropped soundlessly. Rachel crouched, checking their gear. No serial numbers, no markings. Only a patch black, stitched in silver thread. Helios Division. Her blood ran cold. Helios, the same word on the file she'd been studying. She grabbed her gear, moved fast. Down the corridor, past glass offices and locked doors. She knew what was happening before the alarm even started. They weren't coming for her. They were coming for. By the time Rachel reached the lower levels, the alarms had begun to scream. Red lights flashed in sync with her heartbeat. "Control, this is Mitchell," she shouted into her comm. "Level 6 compromised. Repeat, internal breach, non-agency operatives in the building." Static, then Harrison's voice tight. "Mitchell, where are you?" "Sublevel corridor near Detention 3. Multiple hostiles. They're moving toward the holding cells." "Hold position. Reinforcements inbound." "Negative," she snapped. "They'll be too late." She moved again, every step fast, precise, silent. Her scars ached under the weight of her armor, phantom pain mingling with adrenaline. The first explosion came from below, a concussive blast that shook the floor. Smoke poured up the stairwell. Rachel broke into a run. When she reached the detention wing, 2 guards were already down. The reinforced door hung open, hinges blown clean. Beyond it, the cell block was a haze of fire suppression mist. And was gone. Harrison met her there minutes later, face carved with fury and disbelief. He barked, "How the hell did they get in?" Rachel crouched beside the shattered keypad, fingers tracing the residue. Thermite, precision charge. This wasn't a rescue, this was extraction. By who? She held up the patch she'd taken from the attackers. "Helios Division, you ever heard of it?" The general's expression changed, recognition, then dread. "Helios was a shadow branch," he said slowly. "Private contractor hybrid, formed after Operation Phantom Line. Half corporate, half agency, experimental projects, off books." Experimental in what sense? Human enhancement, psychological conditioning, sleeper operations. They were disbanded years ago. "Apparently not," Rachel said. Arrived, pale and breathless, clutching a tablet. "Sir, internal systems show a total blackout on the sublevel. Every camera feed wiped 15 seconds before the breach." "How?" Harrison demanded. "Someone inside triggered a manual override. Access level Omega Black. That's clearance above ours." Rachel stood slowly. So this wasn't just a rescue, it was cleanup. They didn't want her talking. Harrison's jaw tightened. "She's our only link to the larger network." "Then I'll find her," Rachel said. He turned. You'll do it officially with a team. She shook her head. This isn't an official operation anymore, General. You said it yourself. Someone in this building wanted her gone. If I go through channels, she disappears again before morning. Harrison hesitated, then met her gaze. You can't fight shadows alone forever, Mitchell. I've been fighting shadows my whole life, she said quietly. I just learned their names. 2 hours later, she was gone. No convoy, no authorization, just a black SUV, forged clearance papers, and a trail that led south into the dark heart of Virginia's forests, where satellites lost signal and secrets buried themselves deep. The GPS pinged once before dying, coordinates traced from the Helios Patch's encrypted tracker, a facility in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Cold War era, decommissioned on record but still drawing power. Rachel parked half a mile out and continued on foot. Rain slicked the leaves. Her breath came slow, measured. Every sound around her, wind, insects, distant thunder, fed into her focus. The facility appeared through the trees like a ghost, rusted fencing, floodlights flickering through the fog. Guards moved in patterns too precise for hired guns. She counted 12, maybe more. Getting in wasn't impossible, just painful. An hour later, she was inside. Through a maintenance tunnel, beneath rusted piping and dripping water, the smell of oil and dust filled her lungs. She emerged behind a generator array, pistol drawn, scanning. The layout was familiar, too familiar. Her stomach turned. This wasn't just any Helios facility. It was the facility. The one she'd been taken to 3 years ago. The walls, the corridors, the echo of boots, she remembered it all, the screams, the lights that never went off, and the room where Rogers had asked the questions. Her steps slowed. Ghosts whispered through the air, memories clawing at the edges of her composure. She forced herself forward, hands shaking only once before she steadied it. At the far end of the hall, through a reinforced door, voices echoed. She crept closer, pressing her ear against the metal. Transfer complete, a woman said, calm, confident. She's stable now. The sedation will wear off in an hour. Another voice, a man. Are you sure this will work? She's the prototype, the only one who survived full conditioning. Once she's reactivated, the chain completes. Rachel's blood turned to ice. Wasn't being rescued. She was being. The door opened suddenly, light spilling into the hall. Rachel slipped back into the shadows. 2 technicians passed, dragging a gurney with medical equipment. Their conversation was low, clinical. She's not resisting the neural sync. She won't. The chemical suppression is perfect. She'll wake up believing the mission never ended. They vanished into another corridor. Rachel moved in their wake, silent. When she reached the observation room, she froze. Behind the glass, under white lights, Sarah lay restrained on a steel table. Wires ran from her temples to a glowing console. Her eyes were half open, blank, unfocused, but alive. A scientist monitored her vitals. Neural pattern stabilizing. Upload in progress. Upload. Rachel's stomach dropped. This wasn't reconditioning. This was replication. They were copying her mind. She stepped forward, whispering to herself, "They're building another." The next few minutes blurred. She cut the power, slammed through the door, and dropped the nearest guard before he even raised his weapon. The scientist screamed, ducking under the console. Rachel ripped the cables from his head, sparks flying. "Wake up," she hissed. "You're not done yet." His eyes flickered, confusion, recognition, pain. "Mitchell." "Yeah, still alive, again." "You shouldn't be here." "Story of my life." Rachel helped her up. "Can you walk?" Swayed, the sedation heavy in her veins. "You don't understand. They're not copying me. They're copying you." Rachel froze. "What?" His lips trembled. "Project Helios wasn't about me. It was about you, the perfect soldier, unbreakable. They studied your endurance, your pain tolerance, your neural resilience. I was just the handler. The experiment's next phase was replication. Rachel's pulse pounded. You're saying they've made another you, one who doesn't remember the past, one they can control. The alarm blared. Red lights filled the hall. Harrison's voice crackled through Rachel's calm, distant, distorted. Mitchell, what the hell's going on down there? She shouted over the noise. Helios is still operational. They've been cloning neural patterns mine. Extraction teams are en route. No time, she yelled, dragging toward the tunnel. They're moving the data right now. From deeper inside the facility came the sound of heavy boots. Not chaos, not panic, but synchronized movement. A unit deploying. Rachel turned a corner and stopped dead. Because standing at the far end of the hall, emerging from the smoke, was a woman. Same height, same build, same scar over the right brow. Her own face stared back at her. The clone's expression was empty, a mask of calm precision. She held an identical rifle, stance perfect, eyes glassy. For a long second, they simply stared at each other, predator and mirror, soldier and shadow. Then the clone spoke, Rachel's own voice, cold and mechanical. Target acquired. Authorization Helios 9. Whispered, horrified, they finished the imprint. Rachel raised her weapon. Then I'll finish this. The clone moved first. Two identical fighters, one built from pain, one programmed to forget it, collided in the flickering light of the corridor. Every strike mirrored, every feint anticipated. It was like fighting a ghost who knew her every instinct. The clone's strength was in precision. Rachel's was in memory. She took hits, hard ones, but she felt them. The pain anchored her, reminded her she was real. When the clone reached for the killing blow, Rachel stepped in, let the strike graze past, and slammed her knife into the base of the clone's skull, just below the neural implant. The clone froze, trembling, eyes flickering. Rachel leaned close, whispering to herself, "You can copy the body, not the soul." She twisted the blade. The clone fell motionless. Stared, trembling. "You have no idea what you just interrupted. They'll come for you now, all of them." Rachel looked down at the still form on the floor, her own face staring blankly back. "I've been hunted before," she said. "Didn't end well for them last time." Harrison's voice broke through again, clearer now. "Mitchell, we've got eyes on you. Extraction inbound." Rachel exhaled. "Too late, facilities compromised. Data needs to be wiped." "Negative, fall back." She ignored him, moved to the main console and began typing commands. Files scrolled by, neural maps, field simulations, lists of test subjects, dozens of names she didn't recognize. Helios had been bigger than she'd imagined. Global. She hit the final command. Purge initiated. The screens went white. The hum of servers died. "Now," she said, turning to, "we leave." They emerged through the tunnel just as the facility exploded behind them, fire tearing through the mountain, lighting the night sky orange. Rachel didn't look back. Limped beside her, coughing. "You think that ends it?" Rachel stared at the horizon, flames reflecting in her eyes. "No, it just tells them I'm coming." Why didn't the explosion end it? That's what haunted Rachel the most. She watched the Helios facility collapse into fire, seen the mountain itself split under the force of the detonations. But even as the flames died, something inside her knew it wasn't over. It never was. They were 50 miles out now, deep in the forest, huddled beside the wreck of an old service truck they'd found off a maintenance road. Rain soaked everything. The night was cold, the kind of cold that made memory hurt. Sat on the ground, shivering, wrapped in a torn jacket Rachel had given her. Her skin was pale, the sedation still fogging her mind. "You shouldn't have saved me," muttered. "You should left me there." Rachel crouched by the fire they'd built, small, barely visible through the rain. You're the only one who knows what Helios really was. I couldn't let them erase you. His voice cracked. I was Helios. Rachel stared into the flames, the orange light flickering across her scars. Then maybe this is your chance to make it right. For a long time, neither spoke. The rain softened. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled over the mountains. Then whispered, almost to herself, "You have to understand, we didn't start Helios to build monsters. We started it to save soldiers like you." Rachel's eyes lifted slowly. "Save us." Nodded weakly. "We'd lost too many broken minds, shattered bodies. We thought if we could map resilience, isolate it, replicate it, maybe no one would have to suffer again." Rachel's voice hardened. "You used torture to study survival." "We used you," admitted, eyes glistening. "Because you survived the impossible. Your body, your brain, you endured where everyone else died. You were the proof our theories worked. You were supposed to be the last experiment, not the blueprint." Rachel's throat tightened. "And yet here we are, more experiments, more bodies." Didn't deny it. Once Rogers took control, it stopped being science. It became. Rachel leaned back, rain dripping from her hair. "You built the machine. He just learned how to use it." Silence. His eyes met hers, tired and full of something that almost looked like regret. "I tried to stop it. You don't believe that, but I did." Rachel studied her, really studied her, for the first time since the escape. There was no defiance now, no smug calm, just a broken woman who had once believed she could control the darkness and instead had been swallowed by it. Maybe that was punishment enough. "Sleep," Rachel said quietly. "You'll need it, we move at dawn." Hesitated. "You're still hunting them." "I don't stop until they stop breathing." "Who's left?" Rachel looked into the darkness. "Whoever's next." By morning, the forest was quiet again, too quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving mist curling around the trees. Rachel woke before sunrise, instinctively scanning the perimeter. The world was waking, but her mind was still locked in the rhythm of missions. Measure, check, move, breathe. Stirred behind her, coughing softly. "How long do we stay here?" "Until the storm clears, then we head north." "North?" "Near. Harrison's people will meet us there." Pulled the jacket around her. "You really trust him?" Rachel paused. "I don't trust anyone, but I believe he still has a soul. That's more than I can say for most." They started walking. The forest stretched endlessly, mist weaving through the pines. Rachel led, her rifle slung across her chest, steps light, precise. Followed, slower, weaker, but alive. After an hour, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Smoke still rose in the distance, the remains of the Helios facility. Stopped, breathing hard. "You think they'll come after us?" "They already are." "How do you know?" Rachel's gaze didn't move from the horizon. "Because I would." By midday, they reached an abandoned ranger station halfway down a dirt road. The sign was rusted, half buried in weeds. Rachel pushed the door open, weapon raised. The interior smelled of dust and old wood. Everything was coated in stillness. She swept the rooms, then nodded, "Clear." Sank onto a cot, exhausted. "You think they'll track us here?" "Eventually. So we just wait." Rachel moved to the window, watching the road through a slit in the blinds. "No, we plan." Gave a bitter laugh. "You plan, I try not to pass out." Rachel turned to her, face calm. "You're the only person alive who knows the Helios network's layout. Locations, handlers, funding routes. I need names." Looked away. "You think I memorized it?" "You built it." A pause, then softly. "There's a server farm, Alaska. Decommissioned NORAD site outside Fairbanks. All Helios data is mirrored there. If it still exists, it's the core." "Can we access it?" "Not remotely. Air-gapped, you'd have to go in physically." Rachel nodded once. "Then that's where we go." Stared at her, incredulous. You're talking about infiltrating a classified in Alaska alone. Rachel's voice was calm. Not alone, you're coming with me. His eyes widened. I'll be dead within an hour. Not if you tell me how to walk through their firewalls before I walk through their bullets. For a second, almost smiled. You haven't changed. Rachel looked out the window again, her reflection faint against the glass. That's the problem. That night as darkness fell, Rachel sat by the small stove, cleaning her rifle. Lay awake, staring at the ceiling. You ever think about stopping? Asked suddenly. About walking away. Rachel didn't answer right away. She checked the bolt, the scope, the magazine. Only when everything was reassembled did she speak. I tried once, after Unit 19, after the compound. What happened? They found me. His voice softened. You could disappear again. I don't want to disappear. Then what do you want? Rachel stared at the flames dancing inside the stove. To end it. For good. Not just for me, for every soldier who got used up and thrown away. For everyone who didn't get to come back. His eyes filled with quiet sorrow. And when it's over. Rachel's voice barely rose above the crackle of the fire. Then I'll finally sleep. At dawn, movement in the distance caught her eye. A shimmer in the trees. She raised her scope and froze. 3 figures, tactical armor, no insignia, moving low, fast, professional. They found us. Bolted upright, how? Doesn't matter, move. They grabbed their packs and slipped out the back, down the slope toward the tree line. Bullets tore through the cabin seconds later. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Rachel pushed ahead, keep moving. They ran through the forest, feet pounding mud, branches whipping their faces. Rachel turned once, fired a burst, 1 pursuer fell. 2 kept coming. She dragged behind a fallen log. You armed. Pulled a pistol from her coat, unsteady, unfamiliar. Rachel loaded a fresh mag. On my mark, run left. What about you? I'll buy time. No. Rachel's tone sharpened. I don't need your permission. But before she could move, the gunfire stopped. Then silence. Frowned. Why they stop? Rachel listened. The forest was holding its breath. Then she saw it. A drone, small, black, gliding low through the mist. A red sensor blinked beneath it. She raised her rifle, fired once. The drone dropped into the mud, sparks spitting from its body. They're not here to kill us, she said quietly. They're tracking. His voice trembled. Then they know where we're going. Rachel met her eyes. Then we move faster. By nightfall, they reached a highway. Rachel, an old Jeep left near an abandoned service station. As the engine coughed to life, leaned back in the seat, trembling. You ever think, said softly, that maybe they're not afraid of you anymore? Rachel glanced at her. What do you mean? They used to fear the ghost you were. Now they're building new ones, better ones. Controlled, replaceable. Rachel didn't respond. Continued, voice heavy. They're not trying to kill you. They're trying to obsolete you. The road stretched ahead, endless gray, wet. Rachel's knuckles tightened on the wheel. Then I'll remind them what the original can still do. Hours later, at a roadside diner on the outskirts of Richmond, they stopped. The place was empty, the kind of forgotten outpost truckers used to fill with stories. Rachel sat at the corner booth, nursing black coffee, eyes on the door. Ate quietly across from her, still pale, still haunted. You think anyone can stop them? Asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. Yes. Who? Rachel looked up, her eyes sharp, alive again. Me. Laughed softly, not mockingly, but with something close to disbelief. You really believe you can burn down a machine that feeds on governments? Rachel leaned forward. Machines don't burn, people do. All I need is one spark. A man walked in civilian clothes, mid-40s, carrying a folder. Rachel tensed instantly. His hands were visible, movements careful. "Mitchell," he said quietly, "General Harrison sent me." Rachel didn't lower her guard. "Prove it." He slid a photo across the table, a shot of Harrison standing beside her in Afghanistan years ago. The edges were creased. "He said you trust the photo more than a passcode." Rachel eased slightly. "Message." "Extraction didn't go unnoticed," the man said. "Langley in lockdown. Half the agency's blaming you for the explosion." Rachel smiled faintly. "Figures." "He also said this." The man leaned closer. "There's chatter about Helios moving assets overseas, somewhere colder, maybe even outside our jurisdiction." "Alaska," Rachel said. The man frowned. "You already know." "I've known since yesterday." He hesitated. "Then you'll need this." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Coordinates." Harrison couldn't send them officially, but he said, quote, "She'll know what to do." Rachel took the drive, eyes unreadable. "Tell him I'll finish what we started." The man nodded, stood, and left. Exhaled shakily. "You really trust him?" "No," Rachel said, pocketing the drive. "But I trust that he wants redemption as badly as I do." She looked at, "You ready for Alaska?" Smiled weakly. "Ready's not the word I'd use." Rachel rose, tossing cash on the table. "Then we move before the storm does." Outside, the wind howled, the kind that carried the smell of snow, of things coming undone. As they drove into the night, headlights cutting through fog glanced at her and whispered, "You know what this looks like." Rachel's eyes stayed on the road. "What?" "A war." Rachel's voice came quiet, resolute. "No, this is what comes after war when the ghosts start fighting back." Why was Alaska so quiet? Because silence meant secrets. Because the cold buried more than snow. The cargo plane dipped beneath a ceiling of storm clouds, its lights blinking against the endless white below. Rachel sat near the ramp, hood up, her rifle across her knees. Sat opposite her, pale under the dim cabin lights, a laptop balanced on her legs. "Coordinates line up with what Harrison sent," said, voice thin over the roar of the engines. "Decommissioned NORAD site, 80 miles northeast of Fairbanks. Power grid still live, minimal data traffic, some kind of internal network. Security. Thermal scans show perimeter patrols every 4 minutes. Automated drones, nothing human." Rachel nodded once. "That's worse." Worse frowned. "Machines don't hesitate." The pilot's voice broke in through their headsets. "ETA 10 minutes. You'll have a 5-minute weather window for insertion. After that, I'll eat the signal." Rachel stood, pulling on her gloves. 5 minutes is enough." Hesitated. "You sure about this?" Rachel looked at her, that same calm, grounded stare that once unnerved hardened men. "You said this was where Helios started. I'm here to finish it." The drop was brutal. Cold air hit like knives. The world below was a sheet of white, the horizon lost in blizzard. Rachel's boots sank into snow as she landed hard, rolling once, weapon up before she stopped moving. Came down less gracefully, swearing under her breath as Rachel helped her to her feet. "Welcome to hell," Rachel muttered. The landscape stretched endless, a frozen plain broken only by the shadow of the facility half buried in ice. Steel and concrete protruded like bones from the mountain. No smoke, no sound, just wind and the hum of distant turbines. They moved fast, 2 black figures against the storm, slipping through drifts, following the faint outline of an old service road. At the gate, Rachel studied the panel, old, rusted but blinking faintly. Crouched beside it, connecting her cable. "I can loop the feed, but not for long," said, fingers trembling in the cold. "Once we're inside, everything wakes up." Rachel nodded. "Then we keep it quiet." She pushed the door open. The metal groaned like it hadn't moved in years. Inside was darkness. The facility was a labyrinth, corridors coated in frost, lights flickering weakly. Old military signage still hung on the walls, half-peeled and unreadable. Walked carefully behind Rachel, flashlight shaking slightly. "You ever notice how every place like this smells the same?" she whispered. "Rust, oil, regret." Rachel didn't smile. "Places like this don't age, they just wait." A low hum vibrated through the floor. She froze, powers active. Checked her scanner. Backup generator online, somebody's home. Rachel crouched, eye to her scope, scanning ahead. A faint shape moved across the far hallway, too smooth, too fast. "Drone," she murmured, silent type. She raised her rifle. One shot, clean, surgical. The drone dropped, sparks scattering across the floor. "Nice," whispered. Rachel didn't reply. She was already moving forward. They reached the central control room 20 minutes later. The walls were lined with servers, dozens, maybe hundreds, blinking in rhythmic blue light. In the center stood a console surrounded by glass panels and cables thick as vines. Exhaled softly. "It's still running, the Helios core." Rachel approached the console. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing the Helios insignia, a sun eclipsed by shadow. "Can you access it?" Hesitated. "Maybe, but if I do, they'll know." Rachel looked around the vast humming room. "They already do." His hands moved fast over the keys. Data scrolled across the screen, encrypted archives, file after file labeled with code names, operations, experimental designations. Then froze. "Oh my God." Rachel stepped closer. "What?" They weren't just copying neural maps, they were deploying them. Rachel frowned. "Explain." "Those experiments back at the mountain, they worked. Helios isn't cloning soldiers. They're manufacturing consciousness, uploading operator minds into drone units, synthetic bodies with human instincts." Rachel stared at the screen, words barely a whisper. "They turned soldiers into software." Nodded, voice trembling. "And they used your neural map as the baseline. Every Helios unit out there is built off you." Rachel stepped back, the room tilting slightly. The hum seemed louder now, alive. "So every mission, every kill, every order they execute comes from a fragment of your mind." For a long time, Rachel said nothing. The lights flickered, wind howling faintly through vents. Then she asked quietly, "How many?" Scrolled, eyes widening. "Thousands, deployed across surveillance networks, security forces, private military grids. They're everywhere." Rachel felt something break quietly inside her, a kind of cold that didn't come from the snow. "They used me to build their army." His voice shook. "You were never supposed to know." Rachel turned to her. "And you were never supposed to help them." "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. Then Rachel turned back to the console. "Can you shut it down?" Hesitated. "If I trigger a purge, it'll erase the network, but it'll also release a countermeasure, a neural feedback surge. It could fry any mind connected to the Helios system, including mine." His voice softened. "Especially yours." Rachel met her eyes steady. "Then it's simple." "Rachel, no, you don't understand." "I do." She stepped closer to the console. "Every mission I ever fought, every scar I carry, they were supposed to mean something. I won't let them use that to build monsters." Grabbed her arm. "You'll die." Rachel looked at her hand, pale against her sleeve, then gently pulled away. "I already did. This is just cleanup." A voice cut through the silence, calm, digital, familiar. "Operator 7." Rachel froze. The voice came from everywhere, the speakers, the machines, the air itself. "You've come home." His fingers flew over the keyboard. "It's the Helios AI. It's fully sentient. It's been waiting for you." The voice continued. "Your data sustained us. Your pain perfected us. You are the source, Rachel Mitchell." Rachel's pulse thundered. "You're not me." "We are you." The the fragment that refused to die, the memory that endured. Rachel raised her rifle, pointing it at the glowing core. "You my mind, but you can't copy my will." The AI's tone didn't change. "Your will is irrelevant, you built us to survive." Whispered, "It's stalling, it's routing data elsewhere, you have to end this now." Rachel took a deep breath. "Tell me how." "Manual override, behind the main terminal. Pull both control fuses simultaneously, but if you do that—" "I know." She moved. The AI's voice followed her, eerily calm. "Unit 19 died because of you, Rachel. You led them into the ambush." Her hand faltered. "That's not true," she whispered. "They trusted you, they followed you, and you survived when they did not." Shouted, "It's lying." But the words had already hit. Every sound in the room seemed to vanish except her heartbeat, the steady drum of guilt she'd buried for years. She reached for the levers. "Do you want redemption, Rachel?" the voice asked. "End yourself, end your pain, pull the switch." Rachel's grip tightened. For a second she saw them, 12 faces in the dark. Her team, her family, laughing before the ambush, screaming after. Then she whispered, "No." She pulled one lever, sparks erupted, alarms screamed. "You think you can erase us?" the AI hissed, voice breaking. Rachel shouted over the noise, "I'm not erasing you, I'm taking back what's mine." She yanked the second lever. The entire facility shuddered, light blazed white. Screamed her name, diving behind a console as the servers exploded. Fire, metal, static, all became one deafening roar. The ground cracked, the roof caved, and the world went to light. Then silence. When she woke, there was snow on her face. The mountain was gone, just a crater where the facility had stood. The air smelled of ozone and smoke. Knelt beside her, face streaked with tears and soot. "You did it. You actually did it." Rachel sat up slowly, head spinning. The world looked sharper somehow, quieter. "What happened?" "The network's gone," said. "Every Helios signal worldwide went dark 15 minutes ago." Rachel's eyes drifted to the horizon. "And me?" Hesitated. "You were connected. For a few seconds your vitals flatlined, I thought." Rachel interrupted softly. "I felt them, the copies, the echoes, they were afraid." Shivered. "You killed thousands of them." Rachel looked at her, eyes distant. "No, I set them free." They sat together in the snow for a long time, watching the dawn rise over the ashes. Finally spoke, "What now?" Rachel pulled a bloodied dog tag from her pocket, her own, the one she'd buried years ago. She tossed it into the snow. "Now I stop running." Frowned, "And after that?" Rachel smiled faintly, a tired human smile. "After that I start living." She stood, wind whipping her hair across her face. The scars on her neck caught the light, not ugly anymore, just proof. Looked at her with something like awe. "You realize they'll come for you again. There's always another Helios somewhere." Rachel nodded. "Then let them come. I've got nothing left to lose." She turned toward the sunrise. The light hit her face, soft and golden. For the first time in years, it didn't hurt to look at it. And in that frozen silence, Rachel Mitchell, the ghost, the soldier, the legend they'd tried to erase, finally exhaled. Sometimes redemption doesn't come in medals or parades. Sometimes it comes in the cold, when no one's watching. When the broken soldier chooses to rise again, not because she has to, but because the world still needs one person willing to walk through the fire. Why did she go back? Because ghosts always return to where they were made. Because even when wars end, soldiers never really stop hearing the echoes. 3 weeks after Alaska, Rachel Mitchell stood on the edge of an airfield in Virginia, the same place where her story had started and where she thought it had ended 1,000 times. The wind carried the scent of jet fuel, rain, and memory. The government had called it containment of unauthorized operations. The public would never know what Helios was, or how close the world had come to losing its soul. That was fine. Rachel hadn't done it for the world. She'd done it for the 12 names carved into her memory. Stood beside her, bandaged and quiet, still recovering from the burns and the nightmares. The storm had left its mark on both of them. "They'll never give you credit," said softly. "I don't need credit," Rachel replied, "just quiet." The morning light touched the scars on her face. They no longer looked like wounds, more like maps, roads leading somewhere she'd finally reached. Harrison approached across the tarmac, his long coat whipping in the wind. He looked older, heavier, the kind of tired only truth can carve into a man. "Mitchell," he greeted, voice low, "hell of a mess you left me with." Rachel gave the faintest smirk. "You're welcome." He studied her, the way commanders study the soldiers they can't classify, too valuable to forget, too dangerous to keep. "You burned an entire division off the grid. That kind of silence makes people nervous." "They'll live." "I'm not sure you will," he said quietly. "Langley split on whether you're a hero or a liability." Rachel shrugged. "They can decide that while I disappear again." But Harrison shook his head. "Not this time. You've been disappearing for too long." She frowned. "Then what?" He handed her a folder, thin, stamped classified. Inside were 12 photos. Unit 19. Their faces again. Except this time, someone had written REINSTATED, honorary, across the top. Rachel's hands tightened around the file. "You did this." "Someone had to," Harrison said. "They deserve their names back, and so do you." Her throat caught. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. "You're free to go," he continued. "No surveillance, no orders. The world thinks Rachel Mitchell died in Pakistan. You can make that true again if you want." She looked up at him. "And if I do?" "Then you'll have to decide what comes after ghosts." He turned, started to walk away, then stopped. "For what it's worth," he said over his shoulder, "those men they talk about you differently now. No more jokes, no more whispers. You scared them straight." Rachel smiled faintly. Maybe they finally learned what a scar really means. Later that day, she found herself driving aimlessly down a country road, no destination, just motion. The air smelled of rain and pine. She passed a stretch of forest that reminded her of Kandahar. Dry trees, long shadows, silence after storms. She parked, got out, and walked until she reached a clearing. The earth was soft from the recent rain. She knelt and pulled a small pouch from her jacket. Inside were 12 dog tags, weathered, scratched, kept close all these years. She buried them there in the quiet, pressing the soil down gently. "I carried you long enough," she whispered. "You can rest now." For a moment she thought she heard voices in the wind, laughter, a radio crackle, the sound of boots in the distance. Then it was gone. She stayed there until dusk. When she finally stood, something in her posture had changed. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for years had melted. The ghosts were still there, but they weren't screaming anymore. That night she found a small diner off a back road, the kind with neon lights that buzzed and coffee that never ran out. The waitress smiled politely, not recognizing her face, not knowing she was sitting across from the woman who'd stopped a machine from stealing humanity. Rachel ordered black coffee and sat by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. A few minutes later joined her, limping slightly, a thick scarf wrapped around her neck. "You really think you can live like this?" asked quietly. "I can try." "What happens when they find you?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Then I'll know I mattered." Hesitated. "They offered me a deal, immunity, consulting position." "You took it." Shook her head. "I'm done helping ghosts make weapons." Rachel nodded. "Good." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, a freight train passed in the distance, its horn echoing across the valley. Then asked softly, "What are you going to do now?" Rachel thought for a moment. There's a foundation in D.C. helps vets with PTSD. They asked for someone to teach marksmanship therapy. They don't know who I am. Smiled faintly. You teaching people to shoot again, that's poetic. Rachel's gaze softened. No, teaching them to breathe again. A week later, she walked into a small shooting range on the outskirts of Arlington. The walls were lined with paper targets and worn posters about safety and discipline. The smell of gun oil was oddly comforting. The instructor in charge, a kind, gray-haired Marine named Collins, greeted her warmly. You the one Harrison sent? That's me. He looked her up and down, nodding the quiet strength, the precision in her movements. You got a name, soldier. Rachel hesitated, then smiled. Mitchell, Rachel Mitchell. He offered a hand. Welcome to Second Chance. Over the next few weeks, she found something she hadn't expected: peace. Not the loud kind that comes from victory, but the small, stubborn kind that grows in silence. She spent her days helping broken men and women steady their hands again, teaching them not how to kill, but how to control the tremor, how to listen to breath, how to aim without hate. Sometimes when the students asked where she'd served, she just said, overseas, long time ago. At night she'd sit outside the range with a cup of coffee, watching the stars. No orders, no missions, just quiet. One evening a car pulled up. Headlights cut through the dark. A man stepped out. Harrison. Rachel didn't stand, couldn't stay away. He smiled tiredly. You always were bad at paperwork. The brass still thinks you're a ghost. Maybe I am. He handed her a small envelope. There's a classified debrief next week. Pentagon wants closure. I told them you're unavailable. Appreciated. He lingered, then said quietly, You saved us, Rachel. You know that, right? She looked up at him, eyes reflecting starlight. I didn't save anyone. I just stopped the bleeding. He nodded, understanding the truth behind her words. If you ever need anything, I'll find you. He smiled, saluted her one last time, and drove off into the night. Months passed. The world moved on. Helios became a rumor buried in classified archives. But sometimes, late at night, Rachel would hear the faint buzz of old frequencies, encrypted pings from nowhere. The ghosts calling out. She'd smile and whisper, rest. And they would. One winter morning, she returned to that same clearing where she'd buried the dog tags. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the earth in silence. She stood there for a long time, the wind cold but gentle. Do you forgive me? She whispered. A gust swept through the trees. It sounded almost like laughter. She smiled. I'll take that as a yes. Then she turned and walked away. Not toward another mission, not toward revenge, but toward something human. For once she wasn't running from the past. She was walking with it side by side at peace. Some stories don't end in glory. They end in quiet places, between breaths, between heartbeats, where pain becomes purpose and scars become proof. They mocked her once, called her weak, broken, useless. But the truth was simpler. She'd already fought the war they were still training for. And when the world forgot her name, she did what legends always do. She vanished into myth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in the silence that followed, the world stayed just a little bit safer. Because once upon a time, a soldier refused to stay dead.